If I may, some background information on Lloyd Wolf. Lloyd Wolf is a professional editorial and commercial photographer and photography teacher. His clients include the Washington Post magazine, National Geographic Explorer, Vogue, People, Children's Defense Fund, AFL-CIO, Washingtonian, U.S. Holocaust Museum, and many, many others. His work is included in many public collections, including the Corcoran Museum of Art, Washington, D.C. These photos are used by permission of Mr. Lloyd Wolf. These photos are used by permission of Lloyd Worth. Also, The Song of Peace by Jean Langley, Bruce Kavanaugh's organ, Largo by Antonio Vivaldi, Kerm Towler on piccolo, Bruce Kavanaugh is the organist and chancel child director at Metropolitan Memorial United Methodist Church, and Kerm Towler is a solo and ensemble flutist, also playing alto and bass flutes. He performs as a variety of music from Baroque to the present with other instrumentalists as well as singers. He has performed in concert, recital, and in services and venues throughout the greater Washington area, including at Metropolitan Memorial United Methodist Church. I'd like to welcome you to the concert Across America to End Gun Violence. I'm Curtis Pree, and I'll be your master of ceremonies this evening. I'd like to introduce Reverend Dr. Charles Parker, our senior pastor.
Thank you, Curtis. Good afternoon. My name is Charlie Parker, and I'm a senior pastor here at the Metropolitan Church, which is a multi-site United Methodist community here in Northwest Washington, D.C. that's got a great passion around a lot of social justice issues. And gun violence is one of those. And so I'm really excited that we were able to respond to a call from our denomination to start raising the profile of gun violence in our country and starting to develop some energy around how we stop the craziness from happening. So I'm very grateful to all of you for joining us this afternoon, and for all of our performers who will be sharing their gifts with us, and look forward to this being the start of an ongoing dialogue about how we start to come to terms with a rational gun violence policy for our nation. So thank you for being here, and Curtis, thank you for leading us as we move forward.
At this time, we would like to welcome the McLean Madrigal Singers, and they will be doing Imagine by John Lemon. The McLean Madrigals of McLean High School have been in existence for 50 years. They are an elite group of 18 singers selected from the McLean Choral Department. The Madrigals have received numerous state and national recognitions as an artistic level choir.
There's no heaven. the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will lead us one to national possessions, to wonder if you can. Don't dig for greed or hunger. Don't brotherhood of man. Don't imagine all the people sharing all the world. You may say I'm a dreamer, but I'm not the only one. I hope someday you'll join us, and the world will leave us one.
At this time, I would like to introduce to you Miss Elizabeth Landau, and she will be speaking on the topic of guns and domestic violence. A little information about Elizabeth. Elizabeth Landau is a family law attorney headquartered in Washington, D.C., and with a broad knowledge of expertise in women's issues. She has led workshops and assisted NGOs in more than a dozen countries on issues related to gender-based violence. She has been published in the American Journal of Family Law for her work on forced marriage in the United States. In addition to her legal work, she is an active board member of JANA's Campaign, a national education and violence prevention organization. I'd like to introduce to you now Ms. Elizabeth Landau.
Hi, everyone. My name is Elizabeth. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm really happy to be a part of this event. I am an attorney. I'm a staff attorney right now at the Amara Legal Center, and I do represent domestic violence victims now, but what I wanted to talk to you about related to that, but it was actually one of my first jobs out of college. I worked at a domestic violence shelter in Kansas City, and to this day, that's been the most difficult job I've ever had, including now as an attorney. One of my major duties, in addition to having clients in shelter, was to answer the 24-hour emergency hotline. This was a citywide hotline, and it's hard for me to describe what kind of calls you can get. A lot of times women might be too scared to call the police, because if the police come and then they don't arrest their abuser, they're in a lot more trouble than they would have been before. So what do they call instead? They call the emergency hotline. And so my role with that hotline was to help create what's known as a safety plan, a plan that you can work that is unique to that individual as to how they can exit a violent home safely, oftentimes with children or pets or extended family members. A lot of times those calls were difficult because there would be guns in the home. And how do you safety plan around a firearm? It's difficult. Sometimes calls would be cut off because she could hear the gun cabinet opening in the next room and didn't want to be caught on the phone. I could hear a lot of things on that hotline, and it has stuck with me ever since. I'm sure, as a lot of you already know, domestic violence can be defined as a pattern of behavior in any relationship that is used to gain power and control. And it can happen to anyone, regardless of race, sexual orientation, religion, gender, marital status. There are really complex relationships that can be more than just physical violence. They can be emotional, there can be verbal abuse, there can be intimidation. They can be things that are hard to identify because we might not recognize them and not realize that they're equally dangerous. And often, this violence doesn't end when a victim chooses to escape. Often, that's the most dangerous time, is when someone is leaving a violent relationship, because that is a symbol of a loss of control. Unfair blame can sometimes be put on victims because of assumptions that these victims choose to stay in abusive relationships. But the truth is that bringing an end to abuse is not a matter of the victim choosing to leave, it's a matter of being able to safely escape. When men, anyone would call the hotline. I say women because it was majority women. They were unsure what their options were. They were unsure where to get help. They were unsure how to create a plan. And they were unsure where to go. And the presence of the firearm in the abusive relationship intensified that fear, escalated the risk of violence. And, according to research published in the American Journal of Public Health, the presence of a gun in a domestic violence situation increases the risk of homicide by 500%. To me, that's hard to believe, so I had to check that statistic over and over from different sources. And it makes me feel powerless as an advocate when those numbers are so staggering. The Associated Press did an analysis of FBI homicide data from 2006 to 2014, and on average, 760 Americans are killed every year with guns by their intimate partners. 80% of those victims were women. Female intimate partners are more likely to be murdered with a gun than any other means combined. I think that a big myth about domestic violence is that it's a private issue, that it happens behind closed doors, that we should stay out of it. But I would argue it's an enormous community problem and a big part of our conversation on gun violence. It carries over to the children, it carries over to extended family members, it carries over to police officers who are responding to these incidents, and it can even carry over to pets. Domestic violence is also present in the majority of mass shootings, where it involves the killing of a family member, a current or former intimate partner. And the impact of guns and domestic violence isn't limited just to homicide. It's also used as a threat. I can tell you from my own experience answering the hotline and the work I do now that if there is a gun in that home, it will be used as a threat in the relationship. They will be threatened with a firearm. How difficult would it be to leave if you're being threatened that you'll be shot, or worse, your children? So with all of that, how do you create a safety plan when someone is facing those kind of dangers? Especially when you think about our current policies on guns. I guess I just would like to point out that over 40% of gun sales occur in no questions asked transactions. That means it's over the internet, or it's at gun shows where in most states background checks are not required. So even though federal law and many state laws say that if there's a protection order in place or a restraining order and you're not supposed to have a gun, that won't necessarily prevent someone from getting one, and it won't necessarily take them out of the home if they have them. I was looking at different state statistics and was surprised to discover that in states that require a background check for every handgun sale, 38% fewer women were shot to death by intimate partners. I think that when thinking about domestic violence, it's really easy to say what I would do or what I would want. But that needs to be let go, and we really need to ask, what do they want? What would make them feel safe? And I think when talking about gun policy, that should be a voice that continues to be heard. Thank you very much.
Coming up next on the program, we will have Patrick Landau on violin, Melissa Chavez, soprano, Niven Bender, piano with spoken word poets. Patrick Landau is the composer. Text is revised by Grell Salter. Conception, Abby. Spoken word poets, Emma Claire Martin, Lauren White, Kendall Brown, and Ryan Shepard.
We find ourselves in a country that asks us
to pledge allegiance to a flag whose fabric cannot shield us from the bullets we have come to fear. We
find ourselves in a country that asks us
to support a government that gives more rights to our guns than to people, claims to be a safe, protected nation.
We have school administrations calling for open carry campuses with no legal examination, no proper interrogation.
Of an amendment written before guns could kill masses, of students putting their life on the lines to take classes, sacrificed for the second law of our Constitution,
Sacrificed for a government that won't work towards a solution.
Hear, O God, the voice of my complaint. Guard my life from the dread of the foe. From the assembly of the wicked, hide me. From the throng of those who do evil.
We are children of a country who claims to protect us, but looks away when its corruption affects us.
We stand up for our rights, but our country rejects us.
It won't respect us and our right to live.
This is a call to lay down arms.
To raise a generation that will never see a classroom
And movie theaters and dance clubs.
as funeral ground.
That won't exchange textbooks for tombstones.
Diplomas for obituaries.
A generation that will only learn about gun violence in history class, not the daily news, not through interviews.
The politicians who pretend to care, who offer condolences, promises, and prayers.
But the gun trade has made some of them millionaires.
So don't call us angry, just call us aware.
They sharpen their tongues like swords. They aim bitter words like arrows. To shoot at the innocent from ambush. Shooting suddenly and fearlessly. Holding firm in their evil course, they conspire to lay secret snares. They say, who will see us? Who can search time crimes? They have reached their wicked plots and brought them to perfection. How profound the depths of
We are living in a country that calls itself free, but charges such a high price to go outside, asks us to run, fight, or hide.
But won't listen when we ask for regulation.
Simple legislation.
So please forgive us for our frustration.
Just kidding, we won't say sorry.
For the anger burning in our chest.
For the rallies, the petitions, the protests.
We're trying to prevent a world where bulletproof vests become fashion accessories.
Where victims of gun violence become a permanent segment on the nightly news.
Between safety and freedom, we shouldn't have to choose.
Why can't we be free to be safe and safe to be free?
Let's make peaceful future from violent history.
Hear, O God, the voice of my complaint. Hear, O God, the voice of my complaint.
Thank you all for such an exquisite composition and a passionate presentation. That was Patrick Landau on violin and Melissa Chavez, our soprano. Patrick Landau is the director of youth and is a classically trained violinist and composer, trained by Ian Coleman at William Jewell College. He primarily seeks to integrate the developments of classical music over the past century into the music for the church. Originally from Kansas City, he has spent the past 10 years working with youth as a music instructor, math teacher, and now a youth minister. As for Melissa Jean,
across the sea may come to you and to me. Oh, come, let us go back. Let's go back to God. To God. Go back. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Let us go. Let's go back to God. Oh, come let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Well, I know the way. Let's go back to God. My Lord. Let's go back to God. Well, it's mighty hard. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. And I know that. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. That we all must trust. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Come, let us go back to God. Go back to God. There's trouble in the air. Destruction, well, it's everywhere. And men are being trapped beneath the soil. And nations, great and small, have now begun to fall. Oh, come, let us go back. Let's go back to God. Come on, go back to God. Oh, come on, let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Oh, come on, let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Well, I know the way. Let's go back to God. Without my Lord. Let's go back to God. Well, it's mighty hard. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. And I know that. Let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. And we all must let's go back to God. Let's go back to God. Come, let us go back. Let's go back to God.
In process. And I am happy to, I have to contain my pride, my pridefulness. That was my mother, Paula Pree, in process. My auntie, Pamela Rogers, a part of In Process. And the lovely Miss Tia and Inka Tia, also super soul sisters of song. Thank you.
Give up and hope God will intercede. Come on back. Imagine that we could get it together. Stand up for what we need to be. 'Cause crime won't save or feed a hungry child. Can't lay down and wait for a miracle to change things. So lift up your eyes, lift up your hearts, singing, mercy will we overcome this. One by one can we turn it around. Maybe carry on just a little bit longer, and I'll try to give you what you need. Me and you and you and you just wanna be free, but you see, all the world is just as we made it, and until we get a new world, I've got to say that love is not a whisper or a weakness. No, love is strong, and we gotta get together. Yeah, gotta get, till there's no reason to fight. Mercy will we overcome this. One by one, could we turn it around? Maybe carry on just a little bit longer, and I'll try to give you what you need. Will we overcome this? Yeah, one by one, could we turn it around? Maybe carry on just a little bit longer, and I'll try to give you what you need. Mercy, will we overcome this? One by one, could we turn it around? Maybe carry on just a little bit longer, and I'll try to give you what you need.
Thank you so much. I was so caught up in the first song previous to that, I didn't get a chance to introduce that song. That was Mercy by Dave Matthews, and the director is Pam Rogers. That is, of course, on piano, and our soloist was Mike Wheaton. And this is our Wesley Combo Choir from Wesley United Methodist Church, and we're here. And just some little information about Wesley. combo. The Wesley combo is led by Mr. Mike Wheaton on piano. Also accompanying him is Vince Stroman on drums. Add to that, together with the Wesley Choir and the direction of Pamela Rogers, they provide the Sunday morning worship music at Wesley UMC. The Wesley Choir and Combo plays a wide range of music, including spirituals, hymns, gospel, jazz with Latin emphasis, classical and contemporary Christian, and many original compositions. They rock, truly. And we're so blessed to have them here and sing with us today. Next, our next speaker will be Miss Shelley Jean Marcus, also from Wesley UMC.
As you arrived this morning, you were greeted by a slideshow on the street shrines of Washington, D.C. That show is put together as a work of love by a professional photographer, Lloyd Wolf, who's been working on this now for over a decade. These shrines, each of them, represent a time where his life was suddenly and violently ended. They each speak to the losses of a family and friends who remembered their loved one by these homemade shrines erected at the points where their loved one died. Mr. Wolf sent me 175 pictures. You've probably seen about 20. As I went through those over a course of some time, to see each of these shrines and to read the police report about the person they were honoring was such a burden on my soul. And I honor his work. And I just want to say that he was so excited that there was a place that was west of Rock Creek that wanted to see these images. So I thank him for doing that work. I think it's enriched our lives. And one of the things I want to remember as I look at these shrines is it's not just an individual that's lost. It's not even a family who's in grief. Each of these also speaks to the loss of a community. Each killing represents a network of losses felt by family, friends, co-workers, fellow students, and neighbors. And it's the loss of the potential of a human being who would continue to have created more points on this network. So we need to honor that the fabric of our community here in DC, is torn with each of these killings. The latest DC homicide, it's the 104th this year, is a young man, Marcellus Thomas, who's age 22. He died just this morning, 2:45 a.m., in the 400 block of Riggs Road, Northeast. So in the United States in 2015, there were 13,000 people killed by others with guns. Roughly 50% of these are black men. That's 8 times their proportion in the US population. Can we not be affected by this? What is the reason for this immense violence and loss? What have we as a people done or failed to do that has brought us to this place? These are not rhetorical questions. Dr. Martin Luther King, speaking at Oberlin College in 1963, said, "All mankind is tied together. All life is interrelated, and we are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied together in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. For some strange reason, I can never be what I ought to be unless you are what you ought to be. And you can never be what you ought to be unless I am what I ought to be. That's his quote. For many of us who have economic and social resources, our lives do not force us to see and accept this network of mutuality and destiny. Our personal narratives often tell a story about our autonomy and not about our interdependence. But we can choose. We can choose to change the lens through which we see. We can choose to take responsibility for a part of our world that is not thriving. We do need sensible gun policy, and I think we'll know more and hear much more about this later today and in the days, weeks, months ahead. But what I want to add is that gun violence prevention has to work on a number of levels. Many believe that the most important thing we can do now to decrease gun violence is to work together for good jobs for all of our young people. It's also essential to have policing that both increases community safety while being accountable and respectful to the individuals in underserved communities. And clearly, mental health reform is another important piece. The way things are is not the way they have to be. That's our Christian hope. May we see that we belong to one another, and may we find the place in the web of mutuality that is ours to care for. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shelley. We have this next performer. I happened to be fortunate enough to be in this morning's service, and I was so impressed by this man. He is joining us. His name is Jesse Paladowski. He has shared stages with folk luminaries, including Pete Seeger, Bob Frank, Ann Hills, Brother Sung, Kim and Reggie Harris, Kim Whitley and the Beulah Band, and Magpie. His latest CD, Dancing Toward the Light, was number 5 on International Folk Radio, D charts last year. He leads music and healing workshops at national conferences for organizations like the National Hospice and Palliative Care Organization and the Association of Professional Chaplains. This man, he's quite amazing. Please welcome, along with Miss T.I. Day and original selections of Jesse Paladowski.
Well, I was thinking about an event a number of years back when I was a cheeky young guy and I had an encounter with a police officer and I was being cheeky. And I was thinking, gosh, what would have happened if my skin color were different? And I was thinking about my mom's brother, Bill, who was a Detroit cop who died a number of years ago. And I was thinking about, well, how would Bill have treated my sister Madeline's son, Ben, who's half African? And some of all that came into this song. Through the night, 600 miles or so, feeling fried, only jive on the radio, crossing state lines, cruising down a huge hill, speed trap, flashing blue light, you know the drill, cocky young cop, big attitude, gets on my last nerve, my comeback is rude. hold back my license, give him a tweak. I wonder what would have happened to me if I were driving while black in my red Chevrolet. Driving while black, would I have made that cop's day? Driving while black, if he pulled a power play, some bad cop could just blow you away. Never got the talk, helps young black men survive. Be extra careful, swallow your pride. The man in command won't cut you no slack. You're on enemy turf, no one has your back. When you're driving while black to church on Sunday, driving while black might make some cops day. Driving while black, if he pulled a power play, some bad cop could just blow you away. It's the way it's always been, America's original sin. Find a guy with darker skin and make him take it on the chin. Working class immigrants, my folks paid their dues. Uncle Bill walked the beat in Detroit police blue. Nephew Ben's called black, cause he's mixed race. Scared to death some bad cop will jump in his face when he's driving while black on his spring holiday. Driving while black, cruising down the highway. Driving while black might just make some cops day. Some bad cop could just blow him away. Blow him away. Blow him away.
That was beautiful. Thank you so much. And now, you have one more. Thank you.
I had the honor of going on a historic civil rights pilgrimage with Bernard Lafayette Jr., Dr. Bernard Lafayette Jr., who worked with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and he also was with Dr. King on the day that he died in Memphis. And we went to the site of the Nashville sit-ins of the Civil Rights Movement, one of the early sit-ins, and we went to the Highlander Folk Center outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, where music was such an important part of the movement, and a lot of the nonviolence training, and the song We Shall Overcome really became the anthem of the movement there. And we went to Johns Island, South Carolina, and down to the King Center in Atlanta, and I got to sing this song as part of that pilgrimage. It's called Lift Me Up, and it's got a part for you to join in on. Lift me up, take my hand, all on that same journey across into Canaan land. Wandering in this wilderness, lost without a guide. Just an ordinary man trying to make it to the other side. Don't treat me like a leper, ease my weary load. A simple human touch, and I feel less alone. come on and lift me up. Take my hand, all along that same journey, crossing the Canaan land. Try that, lift me up. Lift me up. Take my hand, take my hand, all on that journey, all along that same journey, crossing the Canaan land. Be there when my heart is breaking, hold me when there's nothing to say. Bless my tears when I am weeping, don't judge when I cannot pray. Stand by
Oh, the Spirit of the Lord is here with us today. As the praises go up, the blessings will come down. Thank you so much for this fabulous lineup of artists and performers. It's just a blessing. It's truly a blessing. This is the concert across America to end gun violence. Next, we'll have our Reverend Dr. Charles Parker with closing remarks.
An amazing opportunity to share together, and as many of you know, this is an event that's happening across our country with dozens and maybe hundreds of performances to raise up awareness of gun violence issues. I'll tell you a little, I have a little confession, and I'm embarrassed about this, but the reality is that the level of gun violence in our country is one of the things that I find most appalling from a moral standpoint in my life. And those of you that have been listening to me preach for many years probably don't know that, because I haven't preached much on it, and I haven't preached much on it, I say to my embarrassment, because I haven't seen much solution or much possibility of a solution. And I don't like preaching to you all if I can't give you something to do. And I haven't seen anything much for us to do. And that makes me deeply sad and embarrassed that I have felt paralyzed. And I've been thinking recently, as you all have been pulling this concert together, that that's not only practically incorrect, it is also a theological fallacy. Because my lack of action essentially says, on some level, I don't think God can do anything. And that's not true. There's nothing that God can't do. And as hopeless as the level of gun violence feels to me in our country, I have to trust that God can do something. And that's going to only happen when we start doing something. A lot of our speakers have talked about the enormous complexity of issues around gun violence, and that's absolutely true. We're talking about issues around economics and jobs and race and criminal justice and a whole range of deeply complex issues. I can't help but feel, however, that the one common theme that runs through this is if we had less guns on our streets, we would have less gun violence. The levels of gun violence in our country dwarf every other developed country on the face of the earth. It's orders of magnitude higher than many other countries simply because of the gun laws. It's not because the other countries don't deal with racism. It's not because the other countries have better criminal justice systems necessarily. It's because there are fewer guns to shoot people with. And dear friends, here's the issue. Our political system has been ground to a halt by a relatively small number of people who won't allow any sensible gun laws to get passed in our country. They're not the majority of people. They don't have all the money, but they have kept any reasonable conversation from happening in this country. And that's just got to stop. Now, the reason that that has happened is not because they're smarter than we are, and it hasn't happened because they've got more resources than we have, or they're better organizers than we are. It happens because this is the issue that is the most important thing for them. And so if you are a pro-gun rights person, you vote on gun rights issues, and they know that. So they simply make a list of all the Congress leaders who vote against gun right issues, and they immediately have a political bloc. We have got to ratchet this issue up higher on our priority list. Almost everyone here is engaged in social justice work of some sort or another. And we're working on homelessness, and we're working on hunger, and we're working on racial reconciliation, we're working on domestic violence. We have got to raise this issue up higher on our list of things to do than it is. We can organize, we can vote, we can lobby, we can raise money, and all of that stuff has got to happen if we're going to have any movement on this issue. So I want to just challenge all of us today to do what I have not done, which is we've got to make a noise about this. We have got to talk about it. We've got to write to our legislators. We've got to talk to our friends. If you're in Washington, you don't have a legislator. So that adds to the feeling of hopelessness and helplessness sometimes for us who are Washingtonians. But you know what? We know friends who are in Maryland and Virginia and across the country, and we've got to start being part of a movement that can turn this situation around. It has got to change. So I want to invite all of us to start to engage this in a more aggressive way than we have done. We have the votes, we have the resources, we can change the policy in our country and get reasonable, rational gun legislation passed. But we can only do it if we're doing it together. This is a group effort because we can't do anything if we're not doing it as a country. I can buy a homeless guy a sandwich, and I have helped feed somebody. We can open up the doors of our church and put men and women in beds and, at least in a small way, address the homelessness issue. We can't address gun violence in a small way. This is an all or nothing deal. We've got to deal with this as a country. We've got to change our culture around our love affair with firearms. And we've got to figure out how to pass legislation that gets more guns off of our streets. There's a lot of organizations that do this, and our United Methodist Church has got an effort through our General Board of Church and Society, the Brady Campaign, and this movement that we are part of this afternoon is going to start changing the way we think about this issue. So I want to invite all of us to be part of that, to be part of making a difference in a situation that frankly feels hopeless. Trusting that with God, nothing is beyond our ability to do. So thank you for coming tonight. And thank you for being part of this and being part of the start of what I hope is a nationwide movement to change who we are as a country around this issue. So thank you.
We'll have a final selection by Wesley Combo and Choir. Love's in Need of Love Today by Stevie Wonder.
Also the DC Labor Chorus. Yes. Led by Paulette. Yes.
could mean the world's disaster, could change your joy and laughter to tears and pain. Is that love in need of love today? Don't delay, send yours in right away. Haze is going round, and it will if we let it, and from everybody we all must take precautionary measures. If love and peace you treasure, then you'll hear me when I say, is that love is in need of love today. Don't delay, sinners in right away. It's going round, oh, it's breaking hearts. Child, please be nice, come to us. Love is what we need today. Don't delay, say yours right away. It's going well, it's going well, oh, it's breaking many hearts. Stop it, please, before it's gone too far. Love is what we need today. Don't delay, say yours right away. There will be love. Did you ever think that love would be in need of love? Just
Thank you, everyone, so much for coming, and that concludes our presentation today. Thank you.